Hello again, everybody. I'm State Representative Tim Miller, and welcome to another episode of Legisplaining, where my goal is to help you understand your government. And when I say help you understand your government, because of course here in the United States, this is your government, this is not mine. I'm duly elected by the people of Minnesota to serve in my capacity, and that's my job to serve all of you. Now, in this episode, I'm fresh off of driving to the Twin Cities to pick someone up at the airport and bring them back. And I live about 120 miles west of there in the hinterland, so you have me a little battle weary. The good news for all of you is if I start boring myself, I'll check in very quickly and know that I need to move on to a better point. So this week, I thought we'd talk about something that's actually very relevant at the national level, but I want to talk about how it applies at the state level here in Minnesota. One of the biggest issues we're facing in Minnesota, of course, is the immigration policies of the United States. And President Trump is holding a firm line on the border, and that's causing all sorts of ruckus in Washington, D.C. So good for him, because when there's ruckus in Washington, D.C., maybe they're actually doing something for all of us. So that's a good thing. I don't want to go into the policy of the federal level. That's going to be mostly conjecture and opinion, other than to say, I will say this part of it. What we're facing here in Minnesota and what I'm about to talk about is a direct reflection of years upon years and decades of bad immigration policy at the federal level. And this is going to be an example of how it ends up hurting us at the state level. Tough decisions have to be made. It's real important that you let people in Washington know that we need to fix the immigration mess now. Not do it with a political leaning, but there's very practical things that we need to do. Because, folks, we've got problems in immigration. And at the border, I can tell you can talk about young families coming over their border or not, but the real issue is we have record number of drugs, and there's record amounts of human trafficking going on, and that has to stop. We also have to address all the problems that we have in the United States with what do we do with all the people that are here. And that's why I want to save that for another time. Maybe I'll talk about it, but tonight I want to talk about how it is showing up here in Minnesota. So in this last week, we had a bill come to the House floor that has an issue here in Minnesota that's been discussed for a couple of years, and it was brought to debate and then vote. And what we refer to this as is driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. Some people prefer to say driver's licenses for undocumented workers. Some people say identifications. What it comes down to is basically this. Minnesota is a very agricultural-based state, and so we have a lot of immigrant work here. We have a lot of blue-collar work. We have a lot of work that middle-class Anglo people really don't necessarily want to do, so they bring in the immigrant population. And there certainly are many properly documented people, but as you might imagine, in a state like Minnesota, we have a lot of illegal immigrants also. And so a lot of them live in my area here. I live in the Wilmer area of Minnesota, if you want to kind of get a bearing of where I live and you don't live here. So I live about 110 miles west of the Twin Cities, farmland. And so we have a lot of illegal immigrants out here, and they're working. Some of them have families. Probably most of them do. There's even some illegal immigrants who own businesses. And you say, how can that be? Well, it takes a step further into the legalness. They have documentation that isn't really theirs. This is a problem. We need to address it. And I'm a law-abiding citizen and believe that everyone should be law-abiding as well. What I want to talk about specifically are these IDs. In the last couple of years, there's been a discussion, argument in Minnesota. Well, these are people who are doing business. They might be undocumented. They shouldn't be here, but they are here. They're working, but they're driving without valid driver's licenses. Now, let that sink in. They're driving without valid driver's licenses. So how do you resolve this? Well, you give them driver's licenses, right? Well, that's a problem, isn't it? So this has been a discussion. Another thing that this expands to is a new Governor Walz, and certainly our Attorney General, Keith Ellison. For those that have heard the name Keith Ellison, he was a U.S. Congressman from Minnesota. And we bring him all out to Washington, don't we? He's a real treat. And in his place is Ilhan Omar, that took his place. I don't know if she's even worse than Keith I don't know if that's possible, but that's the case. So thank you and welcome, Washington, to what we send you from Minnesota. But back on task, there are some people that believe that they want to make this a sanctuary state, and I certainly do not support that, and I will fight against that vehemently. But what they're saying is, well, we have these people that need to be properly trained to drive, and we need to give them some sort of identification off of that. So if a police officer pulls them over, they can show that they are duly appointed to be able to drive. Now here's the rub. If you have someone that is driving and they get pulled over by law enforcement, you have a state trooper that pulls them over and says, "Can I see your driver's license?" They pull out one of these IDs. Now the bright idea we had here in Minnesota was we'll make them look different, and they'll be labeled across the front, not for voting. You will definitely know that this person has the person who has a driver's license is an illegal immigrant and shouldn't be here. Can you see the problem in that? Okay, and that's my problem with this is we are asking law enforcement to basically ignore the law if they come across something like this. Now, I was reminded when we were talking about this many years ago. I was dating this girl in college, and she got a speeding ticket, and being the good boyfriend that I was, I took her in the traffic court and sat there waiting her turn. Now, before they started, the judge came in and said, "Everyone in this room, the police officer that gave you the ticket was doing their job. If they saw you speeding, they have to give you a citation for that. It's not for them to decide whether or not you should have that citation. That's what we do here in court." And I never forgot that. That made a lot of sense to me. And that really takes the burden off of law enforcement to interpret things. Now, of course, sometimes they may have to, but in the case where laws, they're there just to enforce law. That's why they're called law enforcement, right? Well, what they're asking law enforcement to do, a police officer to do with this ID, is if they pull over and they see this, they're supposed to say, "Well, we know that you're an illegal immigrant, but at least you're a valid driver. You drive safely." Do you see the problem in this dynamic? And that's why I don't support this bill. We had the vote in the Minnesota House on Friday of this week. I was not there. For months, I had something planned for the afternoon. These bills come up 3 days in advance, and so I wasn't there. But I will tell you, and I've told everyone that I know very clearly, I would have voted no for this. In past years, when this has come up in different forms, I've consistently voted no for this. One of the problems that they had with this bill, aside from the obvious, is that this police officer pulls them over and sees they're not properly documented, they shouldn't be there. The original bill had, believe it or not, that if a police officer reported them to ICE, that police department would be fined, I think it was like $1,000 or something like that, for actually reporting an illegal act. How crazy has our society come, right? So that was taken out. For some people, that was enough. We had all but 2 Democrats. They have the majority in the Minnesota House. We had all but 2 Democrats vote for it, and we had all but 2 Republicans vote against it. One being near me, the other one to the south of me here. And so this conversation is going to continue. I don't know that the Minnesota Senate is ever going to hear this, but I will tell you that if it goes to the governor, it's going to be signed. And I would encourage you, if you're watching this, if you want to add comment to this, certainly let us know. I want to be able to answer any further questions with that. Here's one other thing that I want to address before we finish up, because that's a very specific subject that we talked about here. But let me use this as an example. The one Republican who voted for this, and I'm not going to give his name because he's not on the show, and I want him to defend himself to his district. I don't want him to send this out everywhere and have people reaching from all over the place. That's not my responsibility to call him out. But I want you to know that he voted for this driver's license for illegal immigrants off of deep convictions that he has that this is something that we should do. And I bring this up because, as you might imagine, he's getting a lot of heat. He's from a district that he won by 22 points in rural Minnesota. That basically means that they think that President Trump is doing the right things for immigration, and something like a driver's license for an illegal immigrant is not acceptable. So he's getting a lot of heat, even from his own support. And that's good. This is, as I said in the beginning, this is your government, and we answer to you, we respond to you. But what I also want to bring up in this, we have a problem in our politics right now, and people blame it on a lot of different things, whether it's social media, it's our modern day, it's that we can't get along, it's that we don't understand each other, so we fight. It's very combative in everything. Now, not a good combative, which I think our government system is meant to have, but combative where it gets personal, it gets volatile, it takes quick shots, it doesn't have conversations. Folks, here in the United States, we need to learn or relearn how to disagree, how to argue our points when we disagree, but in the end, show respect. I'm in Public Safety Committee, and this last week, we were going through our omnibus spending bill. That's where we spend all the taxpayers' money more than what they're already giving us, trying to find new ways, which is too bad. But we go through all the different spending bills and other things attached to that. This was about a 200-page document that we were rolling through in committee. And the Democrats brought in two gun laws, two gun control laws, which I'm definitely against. And in that room in public safety, as you might imagine, by and large, the Democrats, I think everyone in that room, every Democrat was for this and every Republican was against it. It was a red flag bill, and it was a universal background check bill. As you might imagine, there's a lot of people in the audience that were at the committee very strongly on one side or the other. And the Democrats have the majority, so this was moving forward, and it essentially, by the time it was going to be at the end, it was going to pass. We knew that the votes were there to pass this. So there's lots of volatility in the room, very much disagreement. And I will tell you, if you look at the transcripts, you will hear arguments from both sides that are very passionate, very direct, and meant to show that the other side is wrong. And that's part of our system, and that's all acceptable, and that's what we should be doing. But what you didn't see in the room was an attacking nature, a volatile, personal, I'm going to go after that person and just take them down. And that's the difference that I think we need to have on these very controversial issues, like immigration, these other issues. We need to have very serious conversations. We need to push for our point and get things right. That's the way our system was built and the way it was meant. But in the end, we are all Americans. I know sometimes if we don't get along with the other side, we question whether they are. But I can tell you we have the greatest system in the entire world here in the United States. And we have a way of having the most opposite ends on an issue arguing with each other, and they're doing it with their mouths. They're doing it with their tongues. They're not doing it with guns, knives, and other things. And that's a wonderful privilege that we have. And if we're going to continue that, we need to show two things. We need to show integrity in what we say, do what we say what we do, really believe what we're talking about, and we need to show respect, even to the people that we really don't want to show respect to. Believe me, I have a problem with that myself. I get angry at someone in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and I want to take them down, especially when you get a little tired when things get busy. But this is where we can't do that. So on the issue of immigration, very, very serious, huge impacts. Because of the problems that we've had over the years of bad immigration policy, we have very real problems that we have to address. And I'm going to stand firm in my position that if you are illegally here, you shouldn't be here. But the only option that we might have to discuss is if you're already here and it's too complicated to get you somewhere else. If you've never lived in that country, then we're certainly at least going to develop a way to where you can get properly documented. And by the way, if you're a criminal, if you're doing things that if you're not a productive citizen, you need to go no matter what. Those are some of the discussions that we have to have. So in the coming months and years, hopefully we can get some of this stuff figured out. Here in Minnesota, this driver's licenses for illegal immigrants is probably not going to go forward this year any further. It's not going to get signed into law, but this is something that is certainly going to come back. So again, we're going to wrap it up here. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you spending time with us here today. I encourage you to reach out to us when you're watching this. We'll have contact information along with this. Reach out. Tell us what things you would like to talk about. If there's something that didn't make sense today, let me know. If there's something in the process that didn't make sense, let us know. Because we want to be able to do this for you. It's no good for me to legisplain if you have no idea what we're talking about. That's my goal here. So thank you for watching. Have a great evening. Thank you.